4 minutes, Don. 4 minutes. Phone's on airplane. That's curious. Good evening, everybody. Scott Stevens here, and we are going to have kind of a wrap-up look at what's happened across the country this past week. But a lot has happened in the last 24 hours. If you're out west and in the Silver State, the state of Nevada, you might have been awakened bright and early this morning, even before the roosters woke up, to a little bit of shaking. And the West has been incredibly active. geophysically with, or geologically, I suppose would be the other term, geologically, over the last 45 to 60 days. We've had a couple of clusters of earthquakes, this particular one striking just outside of Tonopah, Nevada, with a 6.5. We've had other instances where we've had these rather large quakes striking the western states. Literally just this spring. It's really been impressive how that has happened. And we're going to start with a look at some of the news. Again, here's our 6+ quake, and it was either 6.2 or 6.5, depending on which source you want to go to. It was initially reported as a 6.5, and the USGS has this way of kind of saying, how about a 6.3 or 6.2? Will you settle for that? Well, you don't really have a choice. The event is done. But because that area is simply so sparsely populated, it is wide open. We've got jackrabbits, antelopes, wild mustangs, and a few county roads, not even any interstate highways. But then the one road that was out there that did crisscross where the ground zero was damaged somewhat. So we've had other clusters that started in the last 60 days. Central Idaho, that also started with a mid-6 sized earthquakes. Mono Lake, California, also with a fat 5+, just south of Palm Springs. That was somewhat more recently. And then also middle of March, something around 14, 15 March, was Salt Lake City. That one happened as well. So we'll head over to Twitter, kind of look down some of them. This morning, 6.5 quake, Dr. Lucy Jones. She's kind of an amazing person. So we'll click on this. 6.5 in the Basin Range Geologic Province, just like the 6.5 in Idaho back at the end of March. Both are part of the stretching out of the western U.S. as the North American plate strikes or sticks a bit to the Pacific plate as the two gently move past one another. And we'll go on through here. Historically, western Nevada has had many quakes of similar size. The biggest one was a 7.3 back in 1954. The only other booming happening in Nevada at that particular time was all the atomic testing that was happening out there. A lot of explosions, but that typically was a little bit farther south. That one happened in 1954, about 100 miles north of where today's quake occurred. That Fairview peak sequence began with a magnitude 6.8. Today's was about a 6.5 and at a 6.6, 7.3, and a 6.9 over the next 6 months. So if there's an analogy, or then we might be looking at more quakes following on. This is kind of a 3D plot of the quakes where they've been. So they're not at one particular depth, because a lot of times we'll see quakes that are just mostly at a 10-kilometer or 6 point some odd quake depth. No, these are a little more scattered. So there's something else happening here out in Nevada. And that was the damage that the sheriff went out and, had to let everybody know. So we didn't run into that too hard. So it's been a little bit active. As we look off to the USGS, we've had this cluster out of our Ridgeside, I believe. That's where the Naval Air Station is. One just south of Palm Springs. That one, even here, there's another small quake or cluster happening here. Here's the massive one today. If we zoom in just a little bit, we'll be able to isolate how many quakes say in this region. Here's the number 132. And that was up a little bit higher earlier today, so some must have dropped off. Here's the cluster. Well, this one isn't showing them all. We've had a lot more quakes in central Idaho than that. There's other reporting networks, and they have indicated that we're upward about 25 quakes there today. And then the one just south of or west of Salt Lake City near the little town of Magna, which is just outside Salt Lake City Airport. So it's been kind of busy geologically out west. We'll see how that eventually plays out. If there are larger events looming on the horizon, and I would tend to say that yes, there is something else brewing in the western states to see these big quakes happening, and not just a few aftershocks, but just a steady stream of many dozens of quakes, sometimes 20, 30, 40, 50 per day in the case still ongoing west of Chalice and Cascade, Idaho. Temperatures a lot like yesterday. It's a little warmer in the northeastern states. Boston, 54, I guess it's probably Provincetown, just out on the edge of the Cape, 70 at Providence. And then Florida dealing with some of the influences of what will be Arthur here, as the clouds are there. As Arthur, this tropical storm 90L, as it is given this temporary designation, is still slated and will likely gather strength. The unsettled weather conditions out west with thunder and lightning in Colorado emerging just off the Rockies. Those storms will move eastbound through the rest of the evening hours. Then a lot of activity with severe storms still pressing through New England and then Texas. We're going to focus in on Texas because yesterday we were looking at some waves. This here is just a straight out of what they call an outflow boundary. When you have cold air being drawn down from the tops of these thunderstorms, it comes on down, hits the ground, and then flows out. And it is a quick change in wind direction, and it is Mother Nature's best air conditioning for the summer that get very, very common in Texas. And when you can get an outflow boundary to pass on by as it's rolling through the Gulf Coast and onto the south, two things can happen. You just enjoy a nice cooler evening, and in the state of weather, man, we kind of like it creates another opportunity to see convective activity reignite because it is essentially a cold front that begins to encounter the hot, humid air that still has yet to be exhausted by convection. So this is the radar. Lots of activity. The yellow indicating where we do have severe weather warnings or severe thunderstorm warnings in progress, stretching from far southern, pretty much Concord, New Hampshire, down through eastern Massachusetts, just through Connecticut, and then just north of the New York City metro area. The other area that we're looking at for big weather is the Southern Plains. And we even have a little bit of a tornado watch or warning in progress. That looks like it's close to Wichita Falls, Texas. I guess it's southwest of the county west of there as these storms are beginning to amp up. This is a dry area, so the rains are certainly welcome as long as we don't get too much. But nevertheless, they've got a lot of retention ponds where the overflow of the rivers and streams can be captured, and then that water can eventually soak in. So like to say, outside of a tornado, it's all good. Well, it's all good. We'll just soak it up. Lots of lightning. Just going to be some incredible storms to sit out and enjoy, sit on that deck and kind of watch that as long as we're not dealing with too severe weather where there's actual damage. The lightning's kind of enjoyable, at least in my as a weather watcher kind of book. More severe weather today. Let's head on to tomorrow. It migrates east to eastern Texas, western Louisiana, and then once again, the risk of severe weather as we move on into the weekend, into the western Great Lakes states or eastern Great Lakes states, excuse me, and then into western New England. So it's nothing too unusual, too obnoxious, too crazy, and even the rains. It looks like the heaviest is going to be in the coastal areas of Texas where they've been wet or where they've been rather dry. So the rains are welcome, and then it kind of weakens out. Some heavy rain may be in the Niagara Frontier on up through the Mohawk Valley, and then into the western states. We've got a couple of opportunities or a couple of days where we can see some pretty good rains and even some higher elevation snows where some of that may be focused out into western Montana. So as we head into the weekend, things settle down. At least, well, it depends on if you're in Florida. We will be looking at probably Arthur developing and turning into what will be the first named tropical storm system of the hurricane season, which hasn't officially begun yet. That gets underway as we get to 1 June. All right, everybody, have a great weekend and be well. And if you see something unusual, head us with a little note. I see you over there in the comments. There's Sydney Santee. Hey, everybody, Justin, Matthew Wheeland, and so forth. Some of the folks I know from the years I have been here and there and a little bit everywhere across the country. All right, everybody, have a good weekend and keep looking up.